The vast chamber stretched upward into darkness, its crystalline walls pulsing with an eerie blue light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Ambassador Thomas Grant stood alone on a circular platform in the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back to hide their trembling. Above him, arranged in ascending rings that spiraled toward the ceiling, sat representatives from species he had only seen in briefing files. Some had scales that shifted colors with their emotions. Others floated in containment fields filled with methane gas. A few were so alien that Thomas couldn't even identify which parts were heads and which were limbs. This was the Galactic Council, and humanity was on trial. The Verdani High Magistrate presided from the highest tier, her body composed of living crystal that refracted light into rainbow patterns across the chamber walls. When she spoke, her voice resonated through the entire structure, making Thomas feel the words in his bones. "Ambassador Grant of Earth," she began, each word deliberate and heavy with authority. "Your species stands accused of violating the most sacred law of galactic civilization. Territorial Expansion Protocol 7. Alpha. You have established colonies in space that has been marked as forbidden for 10,000 cycles. How do you answer these charges?" Thomas took a slow breath. Every diplomat on Earth had warned him this moment would be difficult. But nothing had prepared him for the reality of standing before the combined power of 47 species. Each one more advanced than humanity, each one united in their judgment. "High Magistrate," Thomas said, keeping his voice steady, "Earth contests these charges. We have established colonies only within our own sovereign territory that humanity has occupied for 3 generations. A sound like grinding metal filled the chamber. The Krovan delegate rose from his seat, his massive form covered in chitinous plates that clicked together as he moved. Impossible. Those sectors have been marked as void space on every galactic map for thousands of years. No life can exist there. No ships can travel there. Your very presence in that region violates the natural order of the universe." "And yet," Thomas replied, pulling a small data crystal from his jacket pocket, "we exist there. We thrive there. And we have documentation to prove it." He held up the crystal. The gesture seemed small and insignificant in the massive chamber, but every eye or sensor or awareness in the room focused on that tiny object. The magistrate's crystalline fingers tapped against her podium. "Explain yourself, human." Thomas activated the crystal. Holographic displays materialized in the air around him, showing detailed star charts, colony manifests, population data, and real-time video feeds from 32 human worlds. The images floated through the chamber, impossible to ignore. "This is New Aurora," Thomas said, gesturing to one feed showing a bustling city beneath alien skies. Population 8.3 million. Established 42 years ago. This is Horizon Station, our furthest outpost. 500,000 residents. And this, he expanded another image, is the complete survey of human-controlled space. Every star, every planet, every established route between our worlds. The silence that followed was absolute. Thomas could see confusion rippling through the assembled delegates. Some leaned forward, studying the data with what he assumed was disbelief. Others withdrew, as if the very images offended them. A new voice spoke, thin and reedy, coming from a delegate whose species Thomas didn't recognize. "This cannot be accurate. The region you describe is the dead zone. We have sent expeditions there. Scientific vessels. Military scouts. None returned. Not one. They simply vanished the moment they crossed the boundary into that space." "How many?" Thomas asked quietly. "What? How many expeditions has the galactic community sent into what you call the dead zone?" The Verdani magistrate accessed her own data systems. Over the past 10,000 cycles, 147 separate missions have been dispatched to survey or explore the regions surrounding your acclaimed territory. All were lost without trace. No distress signals, no debris fields, no evidence of their fate whatsoever. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine despite the chamber's controlled temperature. "And you never told us this? When humanity made first contact 15 years ago, when we presented our territorial claims, Nobody mentioned that you'd lost ships in our space. We assumed you were lying, the Krovan delegate said bluntly. We assumed your species had fabricated its colony data to claim territory that didn't exist. The alternative was impossible. What alternative? The magistrate's crystal body seemed to dim slightly. That your species can exist in a region of space where the fundamental laws of physics become unstable, where reality itself breaks down. Ambassador Grant, do you understand what you're telling us? Either you're perpetrating the greatest fraud in galactic history, or something about humanity allows you to survive in conditions that annihilate every other known form of life. Thomas looked up at the assembled council, seeing fear beginning to replace their initial anger. They weren't judging humanity. They were terrified of what humanity represented. I'm telling you the truth, Thomas said. Every human colony in our territory is real. Every citizen is alive and well. Whatever effect your ships experienced, we don't. Our space is normal, safe. We've never lost a single vessel to the phenomena you describe. Smaller delegate. Reptilian, in appearance with scales that glowed faintly, stood up. Then prove it. Let us send an expedition into your territory under human escort. Let us see these impossible colonies with our own eyes. Chamber erupted into debate. Some species demanded exactly that. Others insisted it was too dangerous, that sending more ships into the dead zone was madness. A few suggested that humanity itself was somehow responsible for the previous disappearances. Though they offered no explanation for how or why, the magistrate raised one crystalline hand and silence fell immediately. The proposal has merit. Ambassador Grant, will Earth permit a joint expedition into your territory? Thomas knew this moment would define humanity's relationship with the galactic community. Refuse, and they would be labeled as frauds or threats. Agree, and they might finally get answers to questions that had haunted Earth's scientists since they first encountered the galactic maps and saw that human space simply didn't exist on them. Earth agrees, Thomas said. We'll provide escort vessels and full navigation assistance, but I want something in return. You dare make demands. The Krovan delegate growled. I dare ask for cooperation, Thomas corrected. If something about human space is dangerous to other species, we need to understand why. We need your scientists working with ours. We need complete data sharing. Because if reality itself is different in our territory, then we need to know what that means for humanity's future in the galaxy. The magistrate considered this. Agreed. We will assemble an expedition representing multiple species, each with their finest scientific minds. You will guide them to your colonies. And together, we will discover the truth of the dead zone. Thomas nodded, trying to appear confident even as doubt gnawed at him. The meeting was adjourned, and he was escorted back to his quarters in the diplomatic section of the council station. Only when the door sealed behind him did he allow himself to slump against the wall, exhaustion washing over him. His communication console blinked with an incoming message. Thomas frowned. All Earth communications were supposed to be routed through official channels. This was a direct contact, heavily encrypted. From an unknown source, he opened the message with trembling fingers. The text was brief. Just a single sentence in standard galactic script. But the words made his blood run cold. They're not afraid of you. They are afraid of what is behind you. The message had no signature, no return address. No indication of who had sent it or how they had accessed the supposedly secure diplomatic network. Thomas stared at the words until they blurred in his vision. What was behind humanity? What lurked in the space that only humans could safely navigate? And why did he suddenly feel that agreeing to the expedition had been a terrible mistake? Captain Rebecca Stone studied the assembled fleet through the observation window of the UESS Pathfinder and tried not to show her unease. 20 alien vessels hung in space around her ship, each one representing a different species, each one designed according to principles that human engineers still struggled to understand. Some were crystalline structures that seemed to defy structural physics. Others were organic, living ships that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. A few were so strange that Rebecca couldn't even determine which end was the front, and every single one of them was terrified. Captain, her second officer called from the navigation station. The Verdani science vessel is requesting another systems check before we proceed. That's the fourth one in 2 hours, Rebecca muttered. She activated the communication channel. Verdani vessel. This is Pathfinder. Your systems are functioning normally. We need to begin the expedition. The reply came in the melodic tones of the Verdani science commander, Laysara. Captain Stone, with respect, our sensors are detecting spatial anomalies at the boundary of your territory. Anomalies that should not exist. We cross that boundary every day without incident, Rebecca said, trying to keep the frustration from her voice. Your ships will be fine. We'll be right there. With you? A long pause. Then, proceeding as planned. But Captain, if our vessels begin experiencing the same phenomena that destroyed our previous expeditions, we will abort immediately. The fleet moved forward in formation, with Pathfinder taking point. Rebecca watched the tactical display as they approached what the aliens called the dead zone boundary. To human sensors, it was just empty space, no different from any other region. But she could see the alien ship's readings going haywire as they drew closer. Dr. Marcus Webb, Earth's chief xenoscientist assigned to the mission, stood beside her chair, studying his own datapad. Fascinating, he murmured. The alien sensors are detecting massive gravitational distortions, temporal fluctuations, even readings that suggest space-time is folding in on itself. But our instruments show nothing unusual. Could our sensors be malfunctioning? Rebecca asked. All of them? Simultaneously? And in exactly the same way across every human ship ever built? Marcus shook his head. No, we're seeing reality accurately. The question is, what are they seeing? The fleet crossed the boundary. Immediately, alarms began blaring across the alien vessels. Rebecca's communication console lit up with distress calls, damage reports, and frantic requests for assistance. She stared in shock as the tactical display showed ship after ship falling out of formation, their systems failing in ways that made no sense. Pathfinder to all vessels, she broadcast. Report your status. The responses came in chaotic bursts. The Krovan military cruiser reported complete navigational failure, their computers unable to plot even the simplest course. The organic Talvini ship was experiencing cellular breakdown, its living hull beginning to deteriorate, as if exposed to some invisible toxin. Smaller vessels reported crew members collapsing, overcome by what they described as overwhelming dread. And through it all, the Pathfinder and its crew experienced absolutely nothing wrong. This doesn't make sense, Rebecca said, watching as 3 more alien ships reversed course and retreated back across the boundary. The moment they crossed back into normal space, their systems stabilized. We're in the same region of space. The same physical laws should apply. Marcus was frantically reviewing the data streaming in from the alien vessels. Captain, I need to run a comparative analysis. Can you get me real-time sensor logs from the Verdani ship? Rebecca made the request. Laysara, to her credit, agreed immediately despite her own ship's distress. The data came through. Marcus pulled it up on the main display alongside Pathfinder's own readings. The difference was staggering. Where human sensors showed normal space, the Verdani instruments detected chaos. Space itself appeared to be warping, twisting, existing in multiple states simultaneously. Energy readings spiked into impossible ranges. And strangest of all, there were patterns in the chaos. Structures that the Verdani computers flagged as artificial, but couldn't analyze. They're not seeing anomalies, Marcus whispered, his face pale. They're seeing what's actually there. Captain, human perception of this region is the anomaly. Whatever makes this space dangerous to them, we've somehow been made blind to it. A new alarm cut through the discussion. One of the alien vessels, a mid-sized explorer from a species called the Ranthal, had gone completely silent. It hung motionless in space, all lights extinguished, no response to hails. Rebecca dispatched a shuttle to investigate. The report that came back made her stomach turn. The crew was alive but unresponsive, their eyes open and staring at nothing, their bodies locked in positions of absolute terror. The ship's internal logs showed that they had been recording sensor data when something had overwhelmed their perception. The last entry in the captain's log was a single phrase repeated over and over. It sees us. It sees us. It sees us. What sees them? Rebecca demanded. Marcus didn't answer. He was staring at the long-range sensor display, at readings coming from deeper within human territory. Captain, I'm detecting energy signatures ahead. Massive ones. They're not matching anything in our database. Could it be one of our colonies? No, this is something else. Something big. Rebecca made a decision. All vessels. This is Pathfinder. We're proceeding to the energy source. Any ship that wants to turn back, we understand. No judgment. 5 more alien ships immediately reversed course. That left only the Verdani science vessel, 2 Krovan military escorts, and a handful of smaller research ships. The rest fled back to safe space. The reduced fleet moved deeper into human territory, following the energy signatures. The remaining alien crews reported increasing psychological distress, but they pressed on. Driven by the need to understand what they were experiencing, 48 hours into the journey, they reached the source. Rebecca stared at the main view screen and felt her understanding of the universe crack and reform. Ahead of them, spanning a distance that the sensors couldn't fully measure, was a structure. But calling it a structure was like calling a star a candle. It existed on a scale that defied comprehension, a lattice of energy and matter that seemed to phase in and out of normal space. Human sensors are barely detecting it, Marcus reported, his voice shaking. But the alien instruments see it clearly. Captain, this thing is enormous. It spans hundreds of light years, maybe thousands. Sar's voice came over the communication channel, tight with barely controlled fear. Captain Stone, our analysis indicates this is not a natural formation. This is a construct. Something built this. Something with technology far beyond anything the galaxy has ever seen. Built it for what purpose? Rebecca asked. The answer came not from Lysera, but from the structure itself. Energy patterns rippled across its surface, patterns that the Pathfinder's computers recognized as a communication protocol. Ancient, unimaginably old, but still functional. A message began broadcasting directly into the minds of every being in the fleet, bypassing communication systems entirely. Rebecca heard it not with her ears, but with her thoughts. Concepts translating into understanding without the need for language, containment protocols engaged, unauthorized observation detected, initiating Guardian protocols. The structure began to change. New energy signatures appeared throughout the region, hundreds of them, thousands, all activating in response to the fleet's presence. And Rebecca understood with terrible clarity that humanity's expedition had just triggered. Something that had been waiting in the darkness for a very, very long time. The emergency meeting took place on the Pathfinder, with holographic representations of the alien commanders filling the briefing room. Nobody wanted their crews on the same ship, not after what they'd witnessed. Rebecca could see the fear in every gesture, every movement. These were representatives of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations, and they were terrified. We need to retreat immediately. The Krovan commander insisted, his mandibles clicking rapidly in agitation. Whatever that structure is, we've activated it. We've made ourselves targets. Targets of what? Lysera asked. Her crystalline form flickered in the holographic display, distorted by damage her ship had sustained. We don't even understand what we're looking at. Dr. Marcus Webb stood at the head of the table, surrounded by floating displays of data. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his eyes red-rimmed, but burning with intense focus. I think I'm beginning to understand, and you're not going to like it. All eyes turned to him. The structure isn't attacking us, Marcus continued. It's responding to us, specifically to the alien ships. Captain, pull up the activation pattern analysis. Rebecca did as requested. A 3-dimensional map appeared showing the energy signatures throughout the region. These are the Guardian protocols that activated when we approached the structure. Notice anything? Lysera leaned forward, studying the pattern. They're concentrated around our vessels. The human ship it's being ignored. Exactly, Marcus said. Whatever this system is designed to do, it's not targeting humans. It's responding to non-human presence in this region of space. That's impossible, the Krovan commander said. How would an automated defense system distinguish between species? Marcus pulled up another display, this one showing complex genetic analysis. I've been studying the differences between human neural patterns and those of other species. There's something unique about human brain activity, a specific frequency that doesn't exist anywhere else. At first, I thought it was just an evolutionary quirk, but look at this. He highlighted sections of human DNA, markers that glowed red in the display. These sequences don't fit standard evolutionary patterns. They show signs of deliberate modification, ancient modification, dating back hundreds of thousands of years. The briefing room fell silent. Rebecca felt a chill crawl up her spine. You're saying someone engineered humanity? I'm saying something changed our ancestors in very specific ways, and one of those changes affects how we perceive this region of space. Marcus gestured to the structure visible through the view screen. 2 human sensors, that thing barely registers. To you, it dominates every instrument. We're seeing 2 different realities, and the difference is in our biology. Lasara's form pulsed with agitated light. But why? What possible purpose would such modifications serve? Protection, Marcus said quietly. Or containment. Maybe both. He pulled up the message they'd received from the structure, breaking it down into component concepts. Look at the wording. Conte. N meant protocols. Not attack protocols. Not defense protocols. This system was designed to keep something contained, and humanity exists inside that containment. The Ranthled delegate, who had been silent until now, spoke up in a trembling voice. Contained with what? Or contained from what? Marcus didn't have an answer. But Rebecca did, or at least the beginning of one. She'd been reviewing the ancient message repeatedly, and one phrase kept standing out. Unauthorized observation detected, she read aloud. It detected the alien ships observing. Observing what? What's in human space that the rest of the galaxy isn't supposed to see? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Then Lasara gasped, her entire form brightening with sudden realization. Oh no. Oh no, no, no. What? Rebecca demanded. You've been asking the wrong question. We assumed the structure was built to keep others out of human space. But what if it's the opposite? Lysara pulled up long-range sensor data from her ship. What if it was built to keep something from getting out? And humans were placed inside not as prisoners, but as guardians who couldn't perceive the threat. Marcus stared at the data, his face draining of color. That would explain the modifications. If you need a species to exist in close proximity to something dangerous, you'd modify them to be blind to it. They could live normal lives, establish civilizations, all while unknowingly standing watch over something that would drive any unmodified species insane. But what could be that dangerous? Rebecca asked. The answer came not from her crew, but from Earth's deep space monitoring station. A priority transmission burst through the communication channels, overriding all other signals. Pathfinder. This is Deep Space Monitor 7. We've detected massive gravitational distortions at the edge of the containment boundary. Something is approaching from outside human space. Something big. Rebecca felt her heart hammering. Can you identify it? A pause. Then, in a voice tight with fear, negative, Captain. Our sensors can't get a clear reading. But the alien automated monitoring stations we've been sharing data with are going crazy. They're classifying it as a reality-level threat. Whatever's coming, it's not from our universe. Or at least, not from stable spacetime. The briefing room erupted into chaos. Alien delegates began shouting in their various languages, demanding answers, demanding retreat, demanding anything that would let them escape this nightmare. But Lasara remained focused on her data, and what she found made her go completely still. Everyone, be quiet, please. The authority in her voice cut through the panic. The room fell silent. I've finished analyzing the structure's communication protocols, she said slowly. There's more to the message. A lot more. It's been broadcasting continuously since we arrived, but we've only been translating fragments. I've assembled the complete transmission. She displayed the full message. Rebecca read it and felt the universe shift beneath her feet. 300,000 years ago, the galaxy faced an existential threat. An entity emerged from the spaces between realities, consuming not just matter and energy, but the framework of space-time itself. The civilizations of that era called it the dissolution. They couldn't destroy it. They couldn't contain it. All they could do was hide from it. Marcus picked up the reading. They created pocket dimensions, isolated bubbles of space-time where the dissolution couldn't reach. They modified any life forms found in those pockets, changing their perception so they couldn't see the barriers or understand the danger. Humanity's ancestors were one such species, changed and hidden away inside a protective shell. But why hide us with weapons? The Krovan commander asked, pointing at the activated Guardian protocols. Lysara's answer was barely a whisper, because hiding was only a temporary solution. The modifications weren't just to blind humans to the danger, they were to prepare them. To turn an entire species into a living weapon system, activated only when the dissolution finally found them. Rebecca looked at the structure, at the energy patterns rippling across its impossible surface, and understood. We're not in a containment zone. We're in a weapons platform. And it's been waiting for humanity to spread far enough, to grow numerous enough, to activate enough of the network.
Oh, the network.
The Ranthal delegate asked. Marcus brought up a star map of the entire galaxy. Red points of light appeared throughout it, hundreds of them, all pulsing in synchronization. There are other structures, other containment zones, other modified species. The ancient civilizations didn't create one hiding place. They created a galaxy-wide defense system, with each modified species serving as organic processors in a network designed to fight the dissolution. And we just turned it on, Rebecca said, as if in response every human on the Pathfinder suddenly clutched their heads in pain. Rebecca fell to her knees, overwhelmed by a sensation like ice water flooding directly into her brain. Not painful exactly, but invasive, alien, fundamentally wrong, and then she heard it. Not words, but pure meaning, transmitted directly into human consciousness across the entire network.
Alice.
Descendants, the time of sanctuary ends. You have been prepared. Now you must choose. Activate the ancient weapons, or watch as all reality unravels. The dissolution has found you, and it is hungry. The Galactic Council chambers had never seen such chaos. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the tiers, all talking at once, all demanding answers that nobody had. Ambassador Thomas Grant stood in the center platform once again, but this time he wasn't alone. Dr. Marcus Webb stood beside him, along with Captain Rebecca Stone and the Verdani scientist Lysara. Together, they faced a galaxy in panic. Order! The High Magistrate shouted, her crystalline voice reverberating through the chamber. We will have order. The noise subsided gradually. The magistrate looked down at the human delegation with something that might have been sympathy. Ambassador Grant, we have received the transmission from the ancient structure. We understand the situation. The question now is what humanity intends to do about it. Thomas felt the weight of billions of lives pressing down on him. High Magistrate, before we discuss intentions, we need to ensure everyone understands what we're facing. He gestured to Marcus, who activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. The image showed the dissolution as the ancient sensors perceived it. A wound in reality itself, neither matter nor energy, but something that consumed both. Where it touched normal space-time, existence simply ceased. This is what destroyed the galaxy 300,000 years ago, Marcus explained. The civilizations of that era threw everything they had at it. Weapons that could crack planets. Technology that bent space and time. Nothing worked. The dissolution doesn't exist in our universe the same way we do. You can't fight it with conventional means. So they created us, Rebecca continued. They modified species throughout the galaxy, changed their neural patterns to serve as biological processors. Each modified human brain becomes a node in a network designed to perceive the dissolution and counter it on a fundamental level. Counter it how? The Krovan delegate demanded. Lysara stepped forward, her crystalline form casting rainbow patterns across the chamber. Reality is not as fixed as we believe. At the quantum level, existence is probabilistic. The dissolution exploits this, forcing probability to collapse toward non-existence. But consciousness can also influence probability. A single mind has negligible effect. But 8 billion human minds all linked together, all focusing on maintaining reality's coherence, that has the power to counter the dissolution's influence. You're saying human thought can rewrite physics? A delegate asked incredulously. We're saying human consciousness, properly networked, becomes a form of physics, Marcus corrected. The ancient weapons aren't bombs or beams. They're us. Every human becomes part of a living computational network that defines reality in opposition to the dissolution's attempts to unmake it. Thomas let the information sink in before continuing. But there's a cost. Activation requires every human to consciously accept the neural changes. We'll gain the ability to perceive the true nature of space-time, to see the dissolution, to fight it. But we'll never see the universe the same way again. The comfortable reality we've known our entire lives will be revealed as the carefully constructed illusion it always was. The chamber fell silent. Finally, the High Magistrate spoke. And if humanity refuses, then the dissolution will eventually breach the containment barriers, Marcus said bluntly. It's already found them. It's testing them. Without active defense, those barriers will fail within months. And once it enters our galaxy, it will consume everything. Slowly at first, then exponentially. Within a decade, the Milky Way will be a void. You ask humanity to sacrifice everything, a delegate said quietly. We ask humanity to become what they were designed to be, Lysara countered. And we ask the galaxy to understand that this burden was placed on them without consent, 300,000 years before their species even developed language. Thomas looked up at the assembled council. Earth requests a recess. We need to bring this decision to our people. All of our people. This can't be a government choice or a military order. Every human has to decide for themselves. The magistrate granted the request. Within hours, the situation was being broadcast to every human world, every colony, every station and outpost. 8 billion. On people learned that they had been engineered as weapons, that their comfortable perception of reality was a lie, and that they now had to choose whether to abandon that comfort to save a galaxy that had feared and mistrusted them. The debate raged across humanity. Political leaders, religious figures, scientists, and ordinary citizens all weighed in. Some argued that humanity owed the galaxy nothing. They had been used as tools without consent and had no obligation to continue serving that function. Others insisted that regardless of how they came to be, they were still the only ones capable of fighting the dissolution. And turning away from that responsibility would doom trillions of innocent beings. Thomas watched the discussions from Earth, feeling helpless. The decision couldn't be forced. The activation required willing participation. If even a significant minority refused, the network wouldn't achieve the necessary coherence to function. Then Captain Rebecca Stone requested to address the global assembly. Thomas watched as she stood before representatives from every nation. Her uniform crisp, her bearing military straight, but her eyes showing the strain of the past weeks. I'm a soldier, she began simply. I've spent my entire adult life in Earth's defense forces. I know about duty and sacrifice. But I also know about choice. And that's what we have here, a choice. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Our ancestors didn't get to choose. They were modified without consent, turned into living weapons, hidden away like ammunition waiting to be used. That was wrong. But we're not our ancestors. We're not tools. We're people. And we get to decide what we do with the purpose we were given. Rebecca looked directly into the camera, speaking to billions. The galaxy has every right to fear what we are. We were built to be terrifying. But we're also more than that. We're humans. And throughout our history, when faced with impossible choices, when confronted with overwhelming danger, we've always chosen to stand up. Not because we're weapons. Not because we're programmed. But because that's who we've decided to be. The dissolution doesn't care about our politics or our history. It doesn't negotiate or compromise. It simply erases. And if we don't stop it, it will erase everything. Our children, our future, every species in the galaxy, every world, every star, every possibility of life. That's not a burden placed on us by ancient engineers. That's a reality we face right now. Rebecca's voice strengthened. I vote yes. I choose to activate. Not because I'm a weapon, but because I'm a human being who refuses to watch the universe die when I have the power to fight back. That's my choice. Now you all need to make yours. The speech went viral across human space. Within hours, people began declaring their positions. Artists, teachers, construction workers, parents, children old enough to understand. It's all making the choice that would define humanity's future. The vote was conducted over 3 days, with every human given the opportunity to participate. When the results came in, Thomas stood before the Galactic Council once more. 97% approval, he announced. Humanity chooses to activate. The chamber erupted not in celebration, but in stunned silence. Finally, the High Magistrate spoke. Then the galaxy owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid. What do you need from us? Time, Thomas said, and support. We're going to be fighting a war unlike anything the universe has seen. We'll need resources, coordination, and most of all, we'll need you to remember that we're doing this by choice. When this is over, when the dissolution is defeated, humanity will still exist, and will still be part of this galaxy, if you can defeat it, the Krovan delegate said quietly. Thomas smiled without humor. 300,000 years ago, the ancient civilizations bet everything on this plan. They modified species across the entire galaxy, built weapons on a scale that defies imagination, and waited for the day when their preparations would be tested. Well, that day is here. Let's see if they were right. The activation sequence began simultaneously across all human worlds. 8 billion minds opened to the network, neural pathways reconfiguring, perception expanding beyond the comfortable, illusion of normal space-time into the terrifying. Truth beneath, the stars were screaming. That was the first thing Thomas noticed when the activation completed. The comfortable points of light he'd known his entire life were revealed as massive, churning engines of fusion. Their surfaces roiling with magnetic storms, their cores processing matter at temperatures that defied human scale. And he could feel them, not physically, but as presences in a network of existence that he'd never known he was part of. Is everyone experiencing this? He asked, his voice shaking around him. Other humans were going through the same transformation. Some were on their knees, overwhelmed by the flood of new perception. Others stood transfixed, tears streaming down their faces as they saw reality for the first time. A few were laughing, giddy with the expansion of consciousness. Dr. Marcus Webb stared at his hands, watching them not as solid matter, but as clouds of probability. Particles existing in multiple states simultaneously until observed. It's beautiful, he whispered. Terrifying, but beautiful. This is what the universe actually is. Captain Rebecca Stone stood at the observation window of the Pathfinder, looking out at space that no longer looked like space. The void between stars wasn't empty. It was structured, layered, filled with fields and forces and frameworks that held reality together like invisible scaffolding, and everywhere threaded through everything. She could see the network activating. Human consciousness linking together into a web that spanned light years. Captain, her communications officer, called out, his voice filled with awe. I'm receiving transmissions from every human ship, every colony, every individual. They're all connected. I can feel them all. Rebecca could too. 8 billion minds, each one distinct but linked, creating a collective awareness that was greater than the sum of its parts. She could sense the colonists on New Aurora, feel the determination of soldiers on military vessels, experience the wonder of children on Earth discovering their new abilities, and at the edge of the network, at the boundary of human space, she could perceive the dissolution. It defied description. To call it a thing was inaccurate because it wasn't a thing. It was an absence, a negation, a force that existed in opposition to existence itself. Where it touched the containment barriers, reality frayed and unwound. probability collapsing toward nothing. But the barriers were holding, and now Rebecca understood why. They weren't just shields. They were focusing arrays, concentrating human consciousness into a coherent force capable of resisting the dissolution's influence. All human vessels. This is Pathfinder, she broadcast across the network. Her words traveling not through radio waves, but through the quantum entanglement of 8 billion linked minds. The dissolution is at our borders. We know what we have to do. Let's show it why the ancient civilizations chose us. The response came not in words, but in pure determination. A tidal wave of human will flowing through the network. Artists and engineers, soldiers and teachers, parents and children, all contributing their consciousness to the defense. The first engagement began at Sector 7 Gamma, where the dissolution's probing had weakened the barriers. The entity pushed against reality, trying to force its way through. But it met resistance it hadn't encountered before. Human consciousness pushed back. It wasn't like conventional warfare. There were no weapons, no explosions, no dramatic battles. Instead, it was a contest of definition. The dissolution tried to define space-time as ending, as collapsing into void. Humanity, through the network, defined it as continuing, as maintaining coherence and structure. For the first time in 300,000 years, the dissolution encountered something that could match it on its own level. Ambassador. Thomas Grant stood in the Galactic Council chambers. But now he could perceive the building as it truly was. Not just solid matter, but as a construct of bound energy and maintained probability. The alien delegates looked different too, their forms more complex, existing partially in dimensions he'd never known existed. "Hi, Magistrate," he said. "The first engagement has begun. We're holding the line. We're detecting massive energy releases at your borders," Lasara reported, her crystalline form vibrating with barely contained excitement. "The containment barriers are stabilizing. You're actually doing it." But Thomas could feel the strain through the network. Every human was contributing, but the dissolution was vast, ancient, and patient. It would test every weakness, probe every gap, and never tire. This wasn't a battle that would be won in days or weeks. "This is going to be a long fight," he said. Then something unexpected happened. Alerts began flooding in from across the galaxy. The other containment zones, the other modified species, were activating. The ancient defense network, dormant for 300 millennia, was coming online. Thomas watched in awe as the galactic map lit up with activation signatures. Hundreds of species, each one modified and hidden away like humanity, each one awakening to their true purpose. Some were aquatic civilizations that had evolved in sealed pockets of water space. Others were energy-based life forms existing in the hearts of stars. A few were so alien that even with his expanded perception, Thomas couldn't fully comprehend their nature. But all of them had one thing in common. They'd been designed as weapons against the dissolution, and now they were joining the fight. "It's not just humanity," Lysara breathed. "The ancient civilizations created a galaxy-wide immune system, and we just activated all of it." The Galactic Council watched in amazement as species they'd never known existed revealed themselves. Emerging from their hidden sanctuaries and taking their places in the network, the dissolution had found humanity first. But it was discovering that humanity was only the beginning, Captain. Rebecca Stone coordinated with the other activated species, learning to synchronize their different forms of consciousness into a unified defense. It was like conducting an orchestra where every instrument was a different type of sentient being, each contributing their unique perception of reality to the collective effort. The dissolution adapted, changed its approach, tried new methods of breaching the defenses. But every time it shifted strategy, the network shifted too. 8 billion human minds plus countless others working in harmony to counter each attack. Days became weeks. The strain was enormous. Every human felt it, a constant background awareness of the battle happening at the edges of their space. But they endured, supported by the knowledge that failure meant not just their death, but the end of all existence. And slowly, impossibly, they began to push back. The dissolution had never encountered resistance like this. For 300,000 years, It had existed unchallenged, consuming realities at will. Now it faced coordinated opposition from species that could perceive it, counter it, and most importantly, match its fundamental nature with consciousness turned into a weapon. Thomas stood on Earth, looking up at a sky that no longer looked like a sky. He could see the network stretching across the galaxy, billions of minds linked in common purpose. He could feel the dissolution recoiling from humanity's borders, frustrated by defenses it couldn't overcome. How long can we maintain this? Someone asked. Marcus Webb, standing beside him, smiled despite his exhaustion. As long as we need to. That's what makes us different from a machine. We adapt. We persist. We refuse to give up, even when logic says we should. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council watched the impossible unfold. Species they'd considered primitive or limited were fighting a war that the most advanced civilizations of the ancient era couldn't win. And they were succeeding. The High Magistrate addressed the Council. We owe humanity and the other activated species more than gratitude. We owe them support. What resources do they need? The response was unanimous. Every species contributed. Ships carried supplies to human colonies. Scientists shared research to help understand the dissolution better. Engineers worked to strengthen the containment barriers. The galaxy, once divided by fear and mistrust, united in the face of existential threat, and at the front lines. Humanity stood firm. Thomas received a message from Captain Stone. Her thoughts clear across the vast distance. Ambassador, you should see this. The dissolution is withdrawing from Sector 7. It's not defeated, but it's retreating. First victory, Thomas replied. But there will be more attacks. Let them come, Rebecca answered, and through the network. Thomas could feel the determination of 8 billion humans echoing her sentiment. We were built for this. Not by the ancient civilizations, but by every choice we've made as a species. Every time we've faced impossible odds and refused to quit, this is just the latest impossible thing we'll overcome. The story spread across the galaxy, carried by the alien species who had once feared human space. The maps no longer ended at humanity's borders. Instead, they showed humanity's territory as it truly was, a fortress at the edge of reality. Manned by a species that had chosen to stand guard over existence itself, the dissolution would return. Everyone knew that. This was not a war that would end quickly or easily. But for the first time in 300,000 years, it faced opposition that could match it. A galaxy-wide defense network with humanity as its first and fiercest component, standing ready to preserve reality against the force that sought to unmake it. And in the depths of space, in the quiet moments between engagements, Thomas Grant looked at the stars and smiled. The galaxy had learned the truth at last. The maps ended at humanity's space, not because there was nothing beyond, but because beyond humanity's borders, reality itself became negotiable. And humans, it turned out, were very good at negotiation. Two retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Sonnet 4.5